This is going to be a two-part series. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk everything CAD and design. And then in our part two, which will happen a month from now, we're going to be talking about how we're going to do everything that we did today and take that over to the manufacturing workspace and start creating our designs and our ideas. Just want to remind everybody, feel free to use that Q&A feature that we got on Zoom. Again, I'm the only person here today, so bear with me if I don't get to your question immediately. I'll check it as often as I can, but definitely use the option. So if you have any questions about anything that you feel like you've come across in the past, or if I'm doing similar, or say, hey, how did you do that? Just feel free to drop it in the Q&A section and I will take a look at it. Again, thanks everybody for being here today. Hope your Fridays are going pretty well. I'm coming to you live from a sweltering Michigan. It was more than 100+ degrees yesterday, and that was not enjoyable. We'll go ahead and get started here in a couple of minutes. I'm just waiting to see if anybody else joins us, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. It's about 2 minutes past 1 Eastern here. So again, there's not going to be too much content again today. I wanted to keep this short and sweet because again, depending on your expertise with Fusion, you may have seen a couple of these things before, but it'll be a nice refresher too, just to kind of get you through. How do we go from like blank slate with nothing at all? It's just in my head to something that I can see on the screen. And, you know, it's a workable first step, right? So that's kind of the point of what we're going to do today. And I think even if it doesn't apply to you directly, you can take some of the concepts, some of even the workflows, some of the processes that I'll be using today to maybe apply to things that you're doing at your shop and your hobbies and whatever you're creating and designing. All right. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started here. So here's what we're kind of going to do today, right? So a buddy of mine had some, we'll go through the story here, but like the point is I wanted to create something that was simplistic enough that I could just do in my garage, or, you know, we could expand this into a big, multiple batch production type of thing. So we're going to create a simple bike rack today, right? We're going to go through 4 big steps, kind of the ideas and the preparation part of that. Then we're gonna actually draw everything from the CAD and we're gonna assemble everything, right? And then with step 3, we just want to make sure that obviously it's fun to just draw, but we got to make sure it's functional, right? So we're going to actually run our assembly through a simulation, a static simulation, to see if it'll hold up with our bike here. And our final step is we're going to take a little look at how do we create drawings from our CAD data. All right. So here's the story, right? So we have a little leftover square tubing, 6061 aluminum from a previous project. It's just laying in the on the floor in the garage, right? Might as well make use of it. So that's what we're going to actually use to create our bike rack today, right? So the bike weighs around 30 pounds or so. Now we might just draw this for one bike, but again, when we do the simulation, we can run it to see how many bikes we can actually stack up on there. We're gonna get a little bit creative with our strap-in blocks. So we're gonna try to get them molded to the actual shape of our bike's frame. So that way you guys can see how, you know, if you have very organic shapes and custom shapes of different things that you wanna mate in place, or you wanna just get a molded version, like a negative mold of it so that you can have it strapped in. We're gonna try to use that sort of a design workflow. And then finally, the last piece of information is this is going to go on a Ford F-150. So just wanted to mention that. That way we know what size the hitch receiver bracket is. And that's about it. So again, fairly straightforward and simple idea here we got. So let's get cooking. Let's see what we can do. So I'm going to jump into Fusion here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to bring that up. All right. Should be seeing Fusion. I'm going to go ahead and get this on the big screen here. Might be a little easier. All right. There we go. Perfect. Make sure we got Fusion shared. Awesome. All right. So again, like I said, blank slate. We got nothing. It's just a blank canvas. All right. So we're going to take this thing step by step, go right from the beginning. And just to kind of give you maybe some sort of an idea of like where we plan to end up with what we're looking at, right? I'm going to show you some of my really bad drawing skills, right? So I'm going to say, hey, I just have, paint opened up here. So let's see how well I could do this. So it's just going to be basically a long tube right here. Again, guys, I'm no artist, so please don't judge me. That's going to be our simple hitch, the tube that goes into our hitch receiver, a long tube going this way, and one more tube going that way. And then we're going to decide, hey, do we need brackets here or anything like that? And how do we attach our bike to the actual portion right here? So that's just to give you a simple outline of what we're going to do. And again, thank you for not bullying me about my really bad art here. So I'm going to jump back into Fusion one more time. Awesome. There we go. Okay, so like I said earlier, I'm going to start drawing right from scratch. Now, I did go ahead and prepare a couple of models here, also just because we're on a little bit of a time constraint, but let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to do a simple sketch of this, right? So the first things first, I want to create a tube, right? So again, you can go ahead and download custom tube models that you can find on the internet. But again, I can show you fairly simply how fast it is to just draw your own aluminum tubing, right? So I'm just going to do a quick center rectangle here. I want to make sure that I actually start on my origin point right there, right? So I'm also just going to do a couple of tips and tricks in between the things that I have learned in the past that have helped me get faster at sketching, right? So when you try to dimension something, especially a rectangle, right, and you're trying to keep everything centered, gone, I feel like other days of trying to do double the, so let's just say I want to make this about 2 inches, right, across. The overall is going to be about 2.5 wide. However, as you can see, I have to dimension 2 separate lengths, right? So instead of actually having to go ahead and type 2 every single time, if I wanted to make changes to the overall length of this, the width of my tubing, I'm actually going to click on my initial diameter here and change my second diameter into a function, right? Doing that, as you can see, anytime you have that FX value set up on any sort of dimension, it's going to change it automatically. So if I had to go back to the original dimension and change this to about 3 inches, as you can see, it's going to be based off of that initial value, right? So this is just a little tip and trick I found, during my way, just to kind of help people out instead of trying to double dimension everything, right? So then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and add a couple of fillets. Let's throw in, let's see, let's make this about 1/4 inch here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for everything on the sides as well. Very quickly, very fast. And I'm going to hit finish sketch. All right, so as you can see, we just got our sketch profile there. Going to go ahead and hit that extrude button, right? Now again, you can use the arrow here. You don't actually have to go ahead and give it an offset, but let's just do about 9.5 inches, 9 or 9. However, what I would like to do here is I would actually like to, let me do that one more time here, say extrude. All right, say 9 inches. So there's my first piece, right? So there's a very interesting couple ways to do this. You can even go ahead and use, I could have done this with drawing 2 different profiles for my sketch. I can also do this by using the shell command. If you haven't used that before, it's fairly simple to use. I'm just going to go ahead and hit that shell side here. Type in the actual value of that I want my wall thickness to be. Go ahead and hit OK. We could also, again, here on the last bit, as you can see, we didn't shell this out completely. But what's really interesting about Fusion is just by clicking on any sort of face and hitting the delete button, I can go ahead and get rid of any of those extra faces or additional geometry, right? So as you can see, I used a couple of different workflows here. I could have done all this via sketch and just a simple extrude. However, it's also kind of easy to use some of the direct modeling features that you get on Fusion, which makes designing a lot more faster. And then let's just say you wanted to get your internal radiuses put in too, right? Again, simple thing, you can go ahead and grab the press pull feature here, grab all of your different edges. I really like the press pull feature because it's almost like a Swiss Army knife to whatever you're really, to whatever sort of operation you would like to do. If it means adding a fillet or even if it means offsetting a face, right? You can go ahead and quickly simply add that in there. I'm gonna go ahead and say 0.25 here and hit OK. Now, obviously the bends might not be correct and right, but again, we're just kind of doing this for, the graphical representation. All right, so perfect. There's my first tube, all right? So based off of my first tube, I'm gonna start creating a couple of different components, right? So whenever you're working with an assembly, my biggest recommendation to everybody is like so if you were to create and sketch and draw new pieces of tubing, try not to do that by just making new bodies, right? The best possible way to do this and best practice to do this would be to just make this into a component, right? So I'm going to actually convert this guy and say I'm going to create a component from this particular body, all right? I'm going to go ahead and name this something interesting. So I'm going to say tube A, right? So there's our initial tube. Now, very quickly and very easily, I can just right click, copy this, and then paste it. I want to make sure I do a paste new too, because that way, all of the links that are tied to the original dimension, as far as sketching geometry, will be completely disconnected, meaning then you don't have to worry that, hey, if I made any sort of changes to the first one, it's going to reflect on the second one, right? Because ideally, we would like this to be completely different. All right. So I just went ahead and moved it kind of similar to this right here. Next thing I want to show you is the align feature, right? So if you haven't used this before, it's kind of easy. Now, there are a couple of other assembly features that you can do, especially joints. I will tell you, however, if this is not an assembly that's actually got moving components, using the align feature is much faster and simpler than actually having to set up joints. If you do have an assembly that actually has certain things that are moving, for example, gears or like any sort of sliding movements or revolutionary movements, you can definitely add a couple of joints for those as well, right? So I'm going to go ahead and use the align feature. Only thing you really need to do is you just need to pick the face of the first contact point and then pick the face of the second contact point. And that's all it takes. Now we can just check to make sure everything's centered, and it looks like it is. If it wasn't, you would repeat the same process on the align for probably just one side of the face here. All right. So here's where things get really cool now, because I told you like earlier, the press pull feature is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of a tool. Now, just by clicking on one of the faces, I can offset this to whatever sort of height I need. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's make it about 25 inches or so. We'll see what that looks like. All right. So again, as you can see, fairly simple things I'm doing here, nothing too crazy, right? First, we just want to make sure everything looks good and works good. Now, what I did prior to us meeting here today at the webinar is I actually went on GradCAD and I downloaded a couple of different models. These are considered reference models, but this is kind of how I like to visualize things when I'm drawing accessories for it. So let's see, I actually went ahead and got this Ford F-150 XLT model, right? It's a parasolid model. As you can see, it's right here. Credit goes to whoever drew this. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of work. It's a mesh body, right? So, but this is something that's part of my workflow. I always spend like maybe, you know, a little bit of time online seeing what people have already created, what they've designed, and see how I can use it to incorporate and make my workflow a little bit easier, right? Because I could do this by getting a measuring tape and going and trying to figure out how big everything is outside. Or I could also just do this, you know, from the comfort of my own chair in my room, but be, you know, somewhat accurate to whatever I'm starting to design here. Okay. So the reason why, again, I brought this in here, as you can see, is because it's going to let me kind of see if I got all the dimensions right and what the actual rack looks like in reference to the truck. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this by just, again, I can change the name for this one right here. I'm going to say this is 2B, right? I need a pin hole for this bottom here. So I'm going to say I need to create a new sketch, create a sketch on this area right here. I'm going to capture my current position, draw a quick little hole right on the center. Depending on what size that hole needs to be and where it's positioned, you can go ahead and dimension that based off of where it currently is. I'm going to say 2.5 inches, and we'll put in probably about a 5/8 pin or so. All right. Finish my sketch here. And I'm going to go ahead and extrude that now. There we go. Just like that, we got our pin for our mount. Perfect. Everything's coming together. This is going to be a welded joint here. And again, if I needed to go ahead and create brackets for this to help alleviate any sort of force on there, we can go ahead and take a look at that. But typically what I do is I try to not design this thing over engineered, because I want to run my simulation first, see what that looks like. Then depending on what it needs, I'm going to come back in here and make some design edits. All right. So again, same thing I'm going to do here. I'm just going to copy that first tube. All right. I'm going to paste it one more time. Here, here. That's a little bit a little closer. You know, there you go. Right. So as you can see, it copied that first hole because we copied the tubing. But like I said earlier, just by clicking the faces that you want to delete, and especially if they're all disconnected, it deletes the hole off of here. However, it still keeps the hole off in here. All right. Next thing I'm going to do, again, same thing earlier, is I'm going to go ahead and align everything together. I pick my face here in the back, face here, and we're done. Okay, so we're coming together pretty well here. So as you can see, it's starting to look very simplistic, right? Next thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead at this point. I'm actually going to go ahead and open up a bike rack that I designed earlier. Here's the bike for it. So there's my cool gravel bike. Looks pretty good, right? Again, credit goes to the designer who drew this. So I'm using all of these external models to kind of help shape what mine's going to look like, right? So we're now up at this point right here. Okay, so I'm going to actually open up our other bike rack that I kind of drew prior to this, just to kind of save a little bit of time so you guys can see the full workflow today. So what I did was I just inserted the model, and you can do this just by clicking and dragging your model in from your data panel, right? Or you can also just insert a new model in here using the insert button. Okay. So, however, I'll tell you, it's just easier just to kind of click and drag and drop your models. The reason why I would like that also is because then, as you can see here, the little chain that's linked on there, it's designating that this model that you dragged and you dropped into this design is still being referenced to its original part file, right? So therefore, whatever changes that you made, and if you're working on multiple different assemblies, if you were to make any changes on that part, it's going to reflect into your assembly too. Okay. So here's my bike rack. right? And here's my port F150. So I'm going to do what I said earlier. I'm just going to drag this. I'm going to drop it into my assembly right here, right? Comes a little bit wonky. That's all right. We're going to drag this out. We're going to turn it up a little bit this way. And do our 90 degrees. And I think I'm also going to have to spin this around a full 180 degrees. There we go. Notice that I'm actually using the wheels just because I don't really know which direction it's going to go in. So I could type in 180, but they could go the other direction. So it's either 180 or negative 180. I like using the arrow wheels. It just kind of helps me visualize exactly where things are. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a 90-degree view of this. And I'm just going to like move this to the point where everything seems to be kind of lining up with my truck here. There we go. Looks pretty good there, right? Same thing, I'm going to take a left view of this, kind of drag it out, make sure everything looks good. There you go. You don't have to get too crazy with it, just to kind of see how things line up, right? So obviously I might have to shorten some things up here, so it doesn't hit anything, but this is just to get a reference as far as size goes, where things are at. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. There you guys can see it. That bike rack's starting to look pretty good, right? So obviously a few things we still need to do is we got to figure out how we want to mount the bike to our actual tube. And I also want to show you how we could probably make a like a custom molded block that'll fit our bike, okay? So let's go ahead and get started on that, right? So as we can see, we have a little bit of reference and things are trying to look good. We get a nice, so healthy checkpoint. I'm gonna go back over to my bike rack here, right? Here, all right. So let's go ahead and let's actually draw those custom molded blocks in here, okay? So first things first, what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to create a block. I'm gonna say create a sketch. Doesn't really matter where I create the sketch. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna use it on that plane, say capture position. Okay. Now let's go ahead and make a couple of rectangles. Now, here's why this is cool. I could do this while the bike is angled, or I could also, before I do that then, let me go ahead and let's rotate our bike just a little bit. So this looks like it's parallel to this surface up here, okay? So I'm gonna say move, I'm just gonna rotate it, just a fair amount, just to kind of see if how straight we can get it with this block here. Well, it looks pretty decent, I would say. Hit OK. There you go. So we tilted it a little bit so that way we can have this sit flat bar here. Okay, so now let me quickly jump back into creating that sketch here. Say create a sketch now. Capture my positions. Make sure everything's staying where it needs to be. We can do this using a center rectangle. Doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and let's make it, we could either just make it one long piece, or we could just also make it in two different pieces, right? So let's do two different pieces so we can see how it looks, right? So all I'm going to do is just like that. Depending on where I really want it, right? I can go ahead and, so I'm going to do that because I really want to like envelope the whole thing. Say finish sketch. I'm going to extrude this little block out here. Say 4 inches wide, right? There we go. So I got my body in there. I'm gonna move this over just a little bit so it's actually intersecting the body that I want to cut through, right? Hit OK. Now what I'm going to do is I can either, it's a little different when you have models involved. I can either use, the window isn't showing up for some reason. Give me 1 second, everybody. Sometimes when you have two screens, Fusion does this. So I'm going to actually quickly close my Fusion here and restart it. Bear with me for just 1 second. This is the magic of doing the live demos. Let's save everything here. All right. Give it a quick second. Pause my share here. Any questions so far, anybody? Go ahead and let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to take it. Or confusion, how we made it to this point so far. All right, so here's where we are, right? We got our bike block here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to use a combine here with my tool bodies. As you can see, all I did was select my target body and my tool body here. By the way, this was a window that kind of went missing, so now we got it back. And I'm going to say, hey, I want to create a new component out of this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. I created my new component. So this is kind of the little block that we were talking about. And now, as you can see, if I hide this initial body right here, we got this component. If I was to do a quick section view of this thing right here, you'll notice that we went ahead and, give me 1 second. We went ahead and basically created an outside mold of that. I guess it just needs it to be one full component. So we're just going to do that one more time. Say modify, combine. All right, so modify, combine, use this. My tool bodies. All right. So there's that. A section view of this is going to show us that we actually have, instead of joining it, we want to do a cut view of this, right? So make sure that we have that set to cut, not join. Hit OK. There we go. So now we should be able to see this particular piece here with that middle circular button there, the circular feature. Now think, for example, in the case, if this wasn't it would have been easier to model this really, right? But if we couldn't, let's see, we have the highlighted icon. Oh, the highlighted icon right here, Eric. Thanks for your question. So basically what happened here is I had an extrusion happen, and we can't tie this extrusion to a sketch because I may have deleted a sketch. So what you're kind of seeing here is more of an alarm than anything. And I could go ahead and either delete this certain feature, or the reason why it might not get deleted is because it's actually still tied into some sort of a reference geometry that we've already drawn here. All right, so it's pretty much just an alarm or an error that says you are missing the sketch plane for this particular extrusion. Okay, thanks for the question. So again, yeah, like I was saying earlier, this is circular in shape. It would have been easier to draw this, right? But I want you to start thinking more of like, if this wasn't a perfect circle and this was more of a custom design, as we see in some of the newer models out here today, right? For example, just this frame right here too, this looks more like an ellipse of sort, right? So I could, let me just show you how we can be done with this feature here instead, so you can get an idea of what that looks like too. So I'm going to repeat the process here, but I'm going to move my block. So I'm going to undo that a couple of times here. All right, so here's my block, right, that I created. I'm going to move this down just so you guys can see what this looks like. And say move. Okay, we're moving this down here. Move it over just a little bit. Right, so as you can see, all I want to do is just want to grab those features and be able to make something that'll mold those features in there, right? So I'm just going to find some sort of a happy position here in the middle, hit OK. Again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use that combine feature. That's my target body. This is my tool body. And what I want to do is I want to do a cut of that, right? If I want to, I can say I can create a new component out of it. So I'm going to hit OK. All right. So now if I hide this and hide my bike, right? I'm gonna go ahead and maybe delete a couple of the inside pieces here because we don't really need that. Oh, let me backtrack one more, or just hide it. So as you can see, we actually got that shape, right? Based on our tool body. And now I can always come back in here and edit this shape, cut away pieces that are not important, reduce the size of it, cut it in half, and all sorts of that stuff, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to show you how we can use like the combine feature. Another way to do this would be like a boundary fill as well. But it'll help you create custom fits for a lot of different organic and complex parts, all right? Perfect, so I'm just gonna go back up here. I'm actually gonna move that back up here, right? Because again, we just wanna hold it right here. So I'll say, let's go ahead and also make this a little longer. As you can see, I'm still using my press pull here. Simply offsetting it the amount that I need to offset it, right? Hit OK. Gonna do that combine one more time. Target body, my tool body, cut it. I don't really need a new component, so I'm just gonna hit OK, right? Hide my initial body. So there's that middle bike hole, right? So now what I can do is I can actually go ahead and maybe we can even, let's see what happens if we try to press pull this feature downwards. As you can see, we get that half position there. Gonna keep going, about halfway through as long as you can sit in there. Hit OK. It's fairly simple, fairly easy to get a molded view of something. Now I can also go ahead and use my press pull and select this face and give it a little bit of an offset so it's not such a tight fit in there, right? Let's give it about 200 thousandths or so. Hit OK, and we're done. All right. So now I can always go ahead and move this over to, right? So I'm going to say, hey, I want to align this. Align it from there. I want to align it there. Actually, we would want to do it the other opposite way. So I'm going to say align that one more time. Or I can actually just move this too, right? Because I want to move this body down, grab that in there too, right? Okay. So looking pretty rough still, but that's kind of the direction that we're heading on, right? The same thing can be said for the bike as well. If I wanted to align it, right? Typically, sometimes you can do this. Say there. See if you can align it that way. This hasn't been locked in, so unfortunately I can't align it. However, what I can also do is I can still move this. So move copy, translate. I don't, because I rotated, as you can see, my axis looks different. But if you do the drop down direction on my design X and Y, I can drop that just down straight. Okay, so I'm going to say negative 1.2 maybe. See if that fits a little better. Okay. All right, so there we go. Right, fairly simple. We're gonna go through and we'll add a couple of straps and all that stuff, right? The accessories can come in later, but we've got like a rough shape. We got the rough outline. We got some dimensions, enough to actually start manufacturing stuff, right? So now obviously we're gonna move on to just make sure. So this is, we're gonna get on to step 3 here. We gotta make sure that this part actually will work, right? So we're gonna go ahead and do a simulation study on this part now, okay? So in order to do a simulation study, again, it's fairly simple. All you really need to do is we don't really need the bike here for this particular area. So I'm going to go on to my simulation workspace now. And again, it takes a little bit of time to compute the actual simulation. However, what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to go through and show you how you would set this up. And then I actually have a results file that I had from earlier that I'll show you how we interpret our results, right? So give me 1 second here while Fusion switch over to the simulation workspace. It does take a little bit of computing power, so it could slow you down, but you should be able to get here pretty quick. Another thing that you can also do while we wait here for the combined feature, like I said, was a boundary fill. But on our next series, we're going to take a look at how we do generative design too, right? So if you wanted to get fairly complicated with trying to maybe reduce the overall mass and try to make a very organic type of a work holding for your bike, what we can go ahead and do is we can actually set two bodies that we want to join together, right? So for example, that'll be the shaft or the rod portion of this frame here and my weldment tube. And we can actually have Fusion generate different iterations of possible designs that can be used to connect or hold the bike directly to our weldment. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hide the bike. We don't really need that, right? So really what I wanna do here at this stage is I wanna create a static stress analysis, right? So a study. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm gonna create a new study. We're gonna do a static stress study, right? And now that I'm already in it, so that's how you would start it off. Next thing I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and set up my constraints, right? So now my structural constraints are going to be my pinhole right here, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and set those as fixed points and I hit okay. Now, what's really cool on the Fusion simulations portion of things is you can also go ahead and add automatic contact sets, right? So Fusion will know depending on where you are aligned and how you're aligned, and if you have intersecting bodies and intersecting components, Fusion will understand that, oh, these are two, this is going to be like some sort of a weldment, or these two components are going to be joined, right? So if they are going to be joined, then what's going to happen is it's going to automatically set up contact sets for that point. So it studies the whole model like it's one complete assembly, right? So the next thing that I go and do is I'm actually going to go ahead and set up my loads here, the structural load, and I want to set it up on force. My target is going to be this area right here, right? That's going to be where most the weight of my bike will be sitting. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give it a magnitude. So I'm going to do, let's just do a pound force, right? Again, the bike is about 30 pounds or so, but you can go ahead and type in whatever value that you would like to engineer this thing to. So even if it's like 120 pounds or something like that, go ahead and hit OK, give it the direction and its point of contact, right? So Fusion is going to take all this information and it's going to basically calculate if there's going to be any sort of deformation, where is the deformation going to happen? Could we maybe take a look at if it does pass the safety factor, which again, you can customize what the safety factor is going to be, right? There's a certain range that the safety factor can fall into. Depending on that certain safety factor, then what's going to happen is it's going to show the deformation if it passes that particular threshold, right? So again, I went ahead and already did the simulation from earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Might be easier to see things after I got the deformation. And pretty much after that, what you would have to do is you would just have to go ahead and hit that solve button right there, right? And then it's going to go ahead and hit, it's going to solve the study for the parameters that you set. I'm not going to hit it just because it's going to take some time. It's going to get slow me down here. So what I did earlier, like as you can see here, pretty much did the same thing I did on the other model. I went ahead and created two studies actually. My first study was with a load. I think I gave it about 120 pounds. And my second study, I really wanted it to break. So I went ahead and added a much bigger force on there. I think I went ahead and did almost 1,000 pounds or so, right? So let's take a look at this one right here, the results that we got for this. So as you can see, from my deformation, obviously. Now, I don't have any issues with the current design just because as you can see, if I put this onto safety factor, I'm still blue in all the areas, right? So this particular bike rack is going to have no problem holding a 30-pound bike, right? Um, and then as you can see here, if I put this onto stress or give it a different safety factor, I can see how much further I can go as far as loading this bike up, right? Because as you can see here, it gives me a max of 36.15 megapascals, which is a lot of force. So even holding 3 bikes is not going to be any problem for this particular design, right? So this kind of ties into the same reason of why I didn't go ahead and create any sort of brackets or anything like that, because again, I would just be increasing the weight to it and I would just be over engineering it, right? So that's kind of exactly what I wanted to find out. Hey, is my design good enough? Like, are these 3 tubes being welded together along with, my work holding here on the top? Is it going to be enough to just, hold my bike without it bending the frame? And it looks like we're totally fine. All right. So step 1, 2, 3 are done now. Pretty much all we have to do next is let's go ahead and make a manufacturing drawing for this, right? So let's just say you don't have time to do this. You want to hand it over to your buddy or somebody who has a drill press or some sort of mill. So you just cut off the ends of the saw and then you want to weld everything together. You want to give them a little bit of a print, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into my design area right here. I'm going to say make a print, say new drawing from my design. Soon after we do that, what Fusion is going to do is it's going to find all of the different components on here. I'm going to say contents. I just want to select certain things, right? So for example, I can select just this component if I want to make a drawing out of this guy, or again, I can go ahead and select all of it, okay? So we're going to do just this little tiny guy right here. Pick your sheet size and what standard you want to work on. We'll stick with the defaults here so you can kind of see what we can come up with. All right, so we're just going to give that one more second here while we switch over to our drawing environment. Perfect, so there's our drawing environment right here. So as you can see, automatically Fusion has brought my initial, what he thinks would be my initial view here, which is fine. You can always drop your initial orientation and you can change this afterwards as well, right? So if I wanted to go ahead and change the orientation right from here, I could say, hey, maybe I want to do a right, view of this. Let me slap that right here in the middle. And what I can also do is I can go ahead and increase that scale size a little bit, right? So we could even try to see if we can fit it if it's a 1:2. Or even a 1:1 might fit. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK right there. As you can see, we got that view in here. So now if you always want to add another view in here, you can just click on base view, right? If you click on base view, it's gonna ask you exactly where you want to go ahead and create that view. Want to make sure that we have the right model here. Okay, cancel. Right here, I can go ahead and say, maybe I'll do a projected view of this guy right here. See a side view of this. All right. Hit OK. And there we have it. So we got a side view and that view. You can always break the link too, so it doesn't have to be actually aligned. I can make this out here in the corner. And let's see if we can get one more projected view based off of this here. And let's try to do a 3D one of it. There we go. All right, for this one in particular, however, I do want to maybe try to change that scale down. Maybe we'll do the 1:4. And let's also just go ahead and say, let's shade this guy. Okay. Close, move it actually into my drawing there. So that's what that looks like. Perfect. Next thing, we want to go ahead and add a couple of dimensions here really quick. So as you can see, just clicking on that dimension button, giving the outside overalls, click a couple of lines from here to here, outside dimensions, get my length. All right, perfect. We're looking pretty good. We could also call out the radius here if we need to, and the radius on the inside. Next thing, what I want to do is maybe I can go ahead and center mark to my hole here, right? Again, quickly dimension that as well. Maybe dimension it from the outside here, so say about 2 inches. And we got to give it the actual diameter, and we got to give it this dimension as well. There we go. So as you can see, fairly quickly, fairly simply, we went ahead and dimensioned everything, right? We can always add a couple of notes if we need to here, right? For example, say deeper all edges. Close. Go ahead and add a couple of notes in there. And you can always also edit your title block to your company specific title block. That's fine. We can save that as a template, right? And as you can see, we're done with our drawing. We're going to hit print, ship it off to whoever needs to create it for us, and we get our first part. You would basically repeat the same process over. So that completes the 4 steps to get something from just blank screen to an actual drawing. So again, let me know if there are any other questions you have. I'm happy to take them. Okay. I'm gonna go over back to here. All right. So pretty much did everything that we needed to do as far as the design CAD portion of it is concerned. We drew everything. We made sure everything was aligned and assembled properly. We also went ahead and created, a custom molded like a bracket to hold our bike if it has different shapes or designs varying from bike to bike. And then we also went ahead and simulated it, right? We ran stress load simulation, right, to make sure it actually works. And we went ahead and then started creating our drawing prints. Okay, so on our next webinar series, which is our part 2, we're actually going to take everything over to the manufacturing portion of it now. We're actually going to see how if we needed to use 3-axis milling or 3D printing. We talk a little bit more about generative design today. And also, let's see if we can nest our parts, right? So if you wanted to make hundreds of these, we can see how nesting comes into play. So we're going to talk about all of that in our next webinar series happening a month from now. So I hope you guys can make it to that one as well. But other than that, that's kind of all I had for content portion of it. Please ask me any questions you have. I'm happy to take a look at it. And I'll stick around here if you have any questions. All right, so if there's no other questions, again, one final thank you to everybody, and please follow our YouTube channel or get in touch with us at www.nexgencam.com. We're happy to take any questions you have. We have a portal for you to submit support tickets or questions. If you just want to, generally want to get in touch with us, please feel free to get in touch with us, see how we can help you. We can talk about all the different add-ons that we have for Fusion 360. If you're really interested in taking your manufacturing and your design to the next level, there's all sorts of extension packages that can be added to your base Fusion 360. So if there's any other things that you would like to know, please let me know. And we're happy to work with you guys. So again, thank you for coming. And that's going to be all from my side. And hope you guys have a wonderful Friday. And I will see you on the next one.